We heard that word for the first time. I remember we played early on. We played a show up at Quinnipiac in Connecticut, and like we did a little interview on the radio station, and the DJ was this girl, and she called us an emo band, and we were like, what is that?
Welcome, everyone, to This Was the Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000s New Jersey punk rock scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Penfold was a New Jersey post-punk emo band who formed in 1995 with members Brian, Mike, Rich, and Steve. The natural course of live performances soon ensued, and the band began to build a small following. After playing music together for over 10 years, 3 record releases, 1997's Your Eyes Have All the Answers 7-inch, 1998's Amateurs and Professionals EP, and 2001's Our First Taste of Escape LP, and hundreds of live shows, they decided to call it a day in March of 2003. Their final show took place in Old Bridge, New Jersey at M&M Hall on March 22nd. They played 2 sets lovingly to an audience of old and new friends from all over the world. Thanks to their Facebook page for all that information. It makes my job a lot easier just to read all that. I reached out to Brian Carley, who fronted the band, asked if he wanted to give the fine audience of this podcast some insight into Penfold, and this is what we talked about. Which Led Zeppelin song first gave him the feels, his love for 120 Minutes, how band t-shirts would get people weird looks in high school, the NJ Lottery gifting him his first guitar, the dynamic of the brothers in the band, were his parents into him being in a band, how his computer lab buddy Ben from Dillinger Escape Plan told him about Tracks East, who was it that gave him confidence about his voice, what was up with the white shirts, what was up with the amps we used to play out of, did they like being called emo, what's I'll Take You Everywhere actually about, what would he do differently if he can go back in time? The Japan shows? Is he playing music now? And a shit ton more. Before we begin, mark your calendars. Yes, each week I'm going to talk about this until the show happens. For July 21st at Debonair Music Hall in Teaneck, New Jersey, where my old band Lane Meyer will be sharing the stage with our old buddies Humble Beginnings and Jettison. Pre-sale for tickets are currently available for $15, and then it's $20 at the door. You can find these at thiswasthescene.com. You just go there, scroll down, and click on the purple button that says "Click here to purchase tickets." We'll also be throwing an after party once the show is done at Debonair until 2 a.m., so it should be kind of fucking awesome. As always, thank you to the people who've donated to this podcast. If you'd like to do so yourself, then just go to thiswasthescene.com and send whatever you'd like. It could be $1, it could be $5,000, be where the fuck you want. It just helps me with the $20 a month to keep this thing hosted. I'm still in the process of designing shirts to sell to keep this thing alive, so keep checking the This Was the Scene Facebook page for any updates on that. Also, if you'd like to be a sponsor, just email me at mike@drive80.com. This thing's been alive for about 12 weeks, and it's got about 4,000 downloads, which is kind of awesome. So I figure one way to keep it alive is to get some sponsors. So there you go. And if you own a company that struggles to explain to people what you do, then check out my animation company, drive80.com, because we solve this problem in less than 90 seconds for you with, you guessed it, animation. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who you know would love some nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. Mr. Carley, am I saying this right? Carley?
That's correct.
Carley?
No, you were right the first time. Carley is correct.
Mr.
It is
Carley.
a girl's first name.
Mr. Girl's first name. Thank you for taking the time on this lovely, what is it, Tuesday, to answer some questions about some emo.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk emo today.
We are. We're gonna go outside the realm of just pop punk today.
We're gonna break some boundaries here. You guys, because that was pretty much your style. But as I start all interviews, I kind of break into what got you into music. But first off, where are you in New Jersey or are you in the city?
I am in Brooklyn. I've been working in the city for like 20 years. I did that thing where like I stayed in New Jersey as long as I could because I thought that's where all my friends were. But after a while, I realized I was just like had a really long commute and never saw anybody. So then I finally just sucked it up and moved to Brooklyn. Oh. And I've been here a while, and I've got a wife and some kids, and things are good.
I saw that you're married. How long have you been married?
Been married it'll be 3 years in September. We did the kid thing before we got married, so we did it sort of the reverse of what is considered standard. But yeah.
Fuck the standard. We're punk rock,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Rules don't apply to us.
That's right. That's how we live. That's how we'll always live. Actually, where in Jersey did you grow up?
I grew up in Essex County, so like Livingston, New Jersey area, near West Orange and Montclair over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I typically ask people what got them into the punk rock, and I don't want to just assume, since you guys wrote emo songs, that you were just full on emo. So what got you? I'll just ask, what got you into music?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I have an older brother. He's 4 years older than me, and he was always cooler than me, and I always looked up to him. And I guess like anyone else with an older brother can probably identify, he was pretty much terrible to me for a long time, but that didn't matter. I still thought he was kind of the coolest kid on the planet. And he started going to, he got into sort of the punk rock hardcore scene. I would say a little more hardcore than punk rock. But he started going to those record stores that we all used to all go to, like Vintage Vinyl. Let It Rock was in Montclair, and there's another one, and oh man, I'm not even gonna remember the name of it. But he would go and he'd come back with all this vinyl and he'd play it real loud in his room. And certain songs stood out to me, like stuff that was incredibly over the top heavy didn't resonate with me as much as the stuff that had melody.
But what was the heavy part that you liked? The guitar sound, the vocals? Yes. It was the guitar.
Yeah, well, I think it was. So it's funny. I don't even remember what year this is. But he got a 7-inch record by this band called Nirvana. And nobody had ever heard of them.
Small local band, no one's ever heard of.
Yeah, small local band. I'm sure people had heard of them at that point, but it was not. It was pre, them breaking. Yeah, pre Nevermind, and it had this song on it called Sliver, and I felt like I'd never heard anything like that where the song was so dynamic, where like the guitars could be quiet. It could go from being super quiet to incredibly loud within like one song.
Do you remember what it felt like when you first? It's kind of one of those where it opens your eyes to something new that you didn't know existed. It's like you didn't know that you didn't know.
Yeah.
And do you remember that feeling?
I do, actually. The first time I can recount this really well. The first time I had that feeling about music, I was sitting downstairs in the house I grew up in, and my dad was playing music for me. My mom and dad listened to music all the time. My dad listened to like, harder stuff. My mom listened to shit like Barry Manilow and the Beatles, and but my dad was playing Led Zeppelin for me, and he played Stairway to Heaven. And when it hit the end, when the guitar kicks in, I got that the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And I had never really felt that before from listening to a song. And that to me was kind of like, at that moment, I was like, I need to figure out how I play music. And so I tried desperately to learn after that. But every time I went, I was like, I want to take guitar lessons as a kid. And, my mom would put me in guitar lessons with like this 70-year-old man who was trying to get me to sight read music. And after, 3 months, I was like, fuck this. I don't want to do this anymore.
So as a kid, you get that like that gut feeling from Stairway to Heaven, which I think a lot of people got, which was kind of funny that became such a joke later on about that. But I mean, it's so true because people felt that. And I think from what I heard from a bunch of people I've interviewed, it's either first time I've heard Zeppelin and anyone I've interviewed, but I hear a lot about Nirvana, especially. Yeah. I had the same thing. It was that moment I saw the video for Smells Like Teen Spirit, and it scared the shit out of me, and I loved it. I talked to Tom Bigwig about this too, and he said the same thing. He's like, I loved getting scared. And do you feel like when you started hearing the hardcore, the hardcore, when you heard the hardcore like records your brother was playing, like it kind of stopped you for a second, and you're like a little bit, holy shit, this is scary.
Yeah, I didn't understand at first, and I think it was he had all these like he would buy all these zines, and it was like all these, shoddy made black and white photocopy things that almost looked like I shouldn't be looking at this. There's something bad about this. Yeah. Like, what is going on? It's like, and there was, I started to understand that there was this like subculture that wasn't bad. It was actually really quite good. And some of the music stuck with me. Some of it didn't. Like, my brother loved bands like Gorilla Biscuits and Goat and all these hardcore bands from New York so much that after a little while I started getting into them too. But he would pull out, like, there was this one band I remember, they were called Fluid, and they had this album called Glue, and it was like kind of hardcore, but it was also kind of melodic, and there's a lot of just random stuff from that era of what he was listening to that stood out. And so when I realized there was all this music out there that I wasn't going to hear on MTV or listening to the radio, I started to go to the record stores with him, and I just buy stuff based on like what the covers looked like. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And just to see, and then I started videotaping 120 minutes every Sunday because my mom wouldn't let me stay up to watch it. So like every Sunday night, I would set the VCR to tape it, and then Monday I'd come home from school and I'd watch it, and that was kind of the other way I'd start to hear about new music and new bands and stuff. And I, like my brother also got me into. He came home with this vinyl of Green Day. It was what was that one? 1039 Smoothed Out
Slap Happy minutes or something.
Yeah. And he brought that home, and I got really into them. And I remember, I said he was a terrible brother, but he wasn't that bad because he would, like, for my birthday, he got me a Green Day Kerplunk T-shirt. And I remember like being in middle school, and nobody knew who the fuck this band was, walking around in this T-shirt of like with a picture of like this anime girl holding a dart gun, and people making fun of me for my Green Day shirt. I had this Dead Kennedys shirt that got banned from the school.
Yep.
Like I came in one day wearing that, and the teacher was like, "What are you?" They put like Scotch tape or masking tape over the name, and I had to walk around with masking tape on my shirt all day.
There was a guy in our grade named Mike Ziobro who he got into it. So we grew up in Jefferson, and he got into it because of his older sister. I think there was always an older brother and older sister that was about 3 to 4 years ahead of where we were, and she got him, I believe, into Fugazi, and there was the Fugazi. This isn't a Fugazi T-shirt. So he would wear that to high school, and so for some reason, everyone thought he was a Nazi because he shaved his head. He got into hardcore, and he wore this Fugazi because of stupidly we're like, oh, he's a fucking skinhead, and and I remember. Just he was a super great guy, still a really nice guy, and it was just so funny. It was that these shirts came into the system, and people automatically assumed it was bad. Like the Dead Kennedy symbol was just like that really sharp D and the K that made it look aggressive.
Yeah, and then the name didn't help either, and it sounded like sort of anti-establishment
presidency.
Yeah. So yeah, it was an interesting time, and I was in middle school, so I was like 12 and 13, and then all of a sudden you get into high school and like Green Day blows up and everyone's talking about Nirvana, and you're like, see, I told you, motherfuckers.
Yeah, I was fucking right, you asshole.
Yeah.
So when did you so you were like, I want to play guitar, you started taking lessons.
Yeah.
And when did you what age was that, and when you started doing that?
Interesting backstory is, so my uncle through marriage, so my dad's sister married this guy who is sort of like revered musically in the like New Jersey rock and roll scene a bit, where his name's Bobby Bandiera. He played guitar for Bruce Springsteen. He played guitar for Southside Johnny and the Jukes. He was like a staple in that band for a long time. And so, like, those were some of my first concerts as a kid. So there was always, like, music was always a big part of the family. So basically, I bought a guitar. I one morning at breakfast with my grandmother won, like, $200 in a scratch-off lottery ticket, and I bought a guitar at Sam Goody.
Wait, you won a lot. You won $200 in a scratch-off, and that's what you got.
Yeah, and I bought a shitty guitar from Sam Goody, and my uncle came over, and he started to teach me a couple of chords and some general stuff. So I had like a small grasp, a small understanding of it, but I wasn't doing anything that would keep me playing. So it just the guitar sat there in the room.
Okay.
Then years later, I tried it again. I did like proper lessons, and I just wasn't jiving. And so I think it was sophomore year of high school. I'm sitting in a biology class. I don't even know if it was biology. I'm just saying that. It could have been earth science. Who knows?
It was a science topic. Subject.
Yeah, exactly. And the this kid is sitting next to me, and he's got like a Metallica T-shirt on, and he was like sketching weird shit on his. You know how we had those like the paper book covers.
Oh yeah.
And I just reached over and I drew something like really ridiculous. I don't even remember what it was. I just drew something ridiculous on his book cover, and he thought it was funny. We started laughing. So like we just randomly became friends. And he after school, we were like walking home together, and he told me he played drums, and I told him I sang, which neither of us did. And then we basically started a band, and that was Mike Jones, who ended up being the drummer in Penfold, and so we just started playing music together. And there was a kid who lived down the street, Rich, who was the guitarist in Penfold, and he was actually good. He was a learned guitarist as opposed to the rest of us, and so the three of us started playing. I would sing. We'd play like, covers of songs. They'd want to play Metallica. I'd come over with like Dinosaur Jr. songs and be like, let's learn this. And they're like, what is this? What do you want us to play? And so we started just jamming together. And then Rich started showing me how to play guitar. He taught me a couple of power chords. And I think out of like the dire need to be in a band, I just would take, I didn't even have a guitar. He had an extra one. I would bring it home and just play all night to try and figure out what the hell I was doing.
Did you learn when you were doing that? Were you learning on tablature, or
yeah, that and by ear? Like for some reason I could just hear it and generally, I was probably wrong half the time, but I could listen to, I used to put records in and just rewind tapes, rewind and try to play that part over and over again, or try to learn a solo, or just figure out what the hell I was doing.
What was the first song you learned where you got it all the way through and you're just like, oh my God, I can play this without like having to hear the CD?
I'm pretty sure it was a Metallica song, just because that's what I was playing with those guys. But it was probably like For Whom the Bell Tolls or something like that. And that was tough too, because those are not easy songs to play, especially when you're learning. But then I think part of like, what we were all listening to, a lot of like punk and I don't know if you want to call it like alternative, and a lot of punk rock and stuff like that. And so we kind of started to lean towards playing more punk stuff just because it was easier for me to play. So we would start to write songs, and it was like, it was leaning into that kind of punk realm. So the first iteration of that band was just the three of us. And it was very pop punk sounding. We were called the Autopilots, I think, at the time. Okay,
so Autopilots.
Yeah. And and we would, we'd do a couple of those. Like what was that? There was a club in Randolph, Obsessions or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to like, try to get shows there. And there was like a local community center in the town we grew up in. You could try to do shows there and stuff. But I think that's when I really started getting the bug, was the terrifying feeling of having to get up and play in front of people those first couple of times, but also there's like the high you get from it that you just can't beat. Like the fact that we're going to play songs that we wrote that nobody's ever heard in front of a bunch of people, not realizing that they don't care.
And they don't care until they care. Like there's this weird tipping point where all of a sudden someone just gives you a chance, and then someone listens to that person give you a chance, and then it kind of goes from there. Were you always the singer?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't always sing the way I did later on. I think I got better over time with that. But, the other guys, I didn't really want to be, especially early on. But the other guys, like, none of them had any interest in singing at all.
Go on.
So somewhere in there, it was literally our band with two guitars and drums, and I
was going to say, it was just literally two guitars and drums and the singer.
Yeah, and I was, I think part of the reason I got decent at guitar is because I was singing and playing at the same time. So but I just did it out of necessity. And then our drummer Mike, his brother Steve, who's I guess 2 or 3 years younger than all of us, he was a guitar player too. And so one day we were going to go record a demo, and we just grabbed him, like, listen, will you come play bass on this? And he was just like, yeah, sure, I'll play bass. And then he just, after that, became sort of our default bass player. But like we kept like searching for a real bass player and could never find one. And
was there any kind of brother turmoil at that age?
Always.
Like from the beginning, there always was?
Yeah. Oh yeah, always. I'm hoping the guys listen to this at some point and hear it. But yeah, there was always some sort of turmoil. I mean, you know, as you would expect with brothers, but there was always like over the stupidest shit too. I mean, just like, you know, whatever they could fight about, they would fight about it.
I wonder if the Ghetto Kids had that problem, because they had their drummer and bassist were brothers too.
Yeah, it was funny. It was funny.
So did you actually go to shows? So you start off, you listen to music, you start a band, you guys are playing together, you guys get Steve in the band. And this time you guys are writing songs and playing them. Were you going to shows before you started playing, or was like your introduction to shows like playing a show?
Yeah, it was. So it's kind of funny. So we were one of those. We practiced like 5 days a week. We were constantly writing songs. We'd write and scrap and start over, and you know, we did a ton of terrible stuff. And then one day, I think so my brother was going to Rutgers at the time, and he got us on a show in a basement there, and it was, I couldn't even tell you the names of the bands at that time, and we were very young. We were all still in high school. In fact, I want to say maybe only one of us could drive at that time. So, nice. Yeah, and so we went out and we played this show, and that's the first taste I got of this fact that there was like a scene out there. And then we got to this stage where we had a couple of songs where I think we finally felt like, oh, this is our sound. And because for a while, I think we were really just struggling with what the hell we sounded like. Every time we wrote a batch of songs, it felt like we were reinventing ourselves or something. And so there weren't like a lot of bands out there that like local bands that I would be able to point to and say like, oh, we sort of, you know, and I think we'll maybe get into this a bit, but we played a lot of shows in quote unquote the scene in New Jersey, but to some degree, I think we always felt a bit like outsiders.
Oh, you guys were totally like, you were nothing like the rest of the bands that were in the scene.
Yeah, and I think we both liked that, and I think it also made us feel a little like, you know, like it was tough to 100% be accepted into certain things. Like I remember there were some promoters who loved booking us, and then there were others who were like just not interested in it. And I think it was just because of the way we sounded, and that was fine. It was just like coming to terms with that fact. You know, but so the way it all sort of went down, where like we actually started playing and getting into shows, was kind of random. But at this point, I started going to college, and it was my freshman year of college. I went to Fairleigh Dickinson, and part of that was because I wasn't a good student in high school, and it was the only school I could get a grant to actually go to. And part of it was like I didn't want to go away to school because I wanted to see what was going to happen with the band. And I think we all sort of had this feeling like maybe we could do something with this. And did
you find that leading up to this point, like based off of what you just said right there?
Yeah.
You know, I remember being a young kid, and I remember watching MTV and seeing, you know, Def Leppard and Bruce Springsteen, and pretending with my friends in front of our parents that we were playing like concerts, and we were just air guitaring tennis rackets and stuff. Yeah. And that feeling always stuck with me. So when it became real, you know, I was like, I always want to do this. So with you, did you find that there was a point when you're listening to music, but this certain age where it just kind of this thing got stuck in your head where it brought you to going to college and saying, I need to stick around because that thing that started at this age, it's not going away, and I need to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. There was like this constant sort of, I mean, yeah, it kind of goes along with the feeling of like doing the pretend concerts when you're a kid. It's like I always felt like I was in my head, I was projecting this image of what this was going to be. Like, I didn't know if we were. I love the idea of us being famous. Also, I mean, you remember it was a very different time. Like you had to get signed to a record label, and you needed a manager and a tour manager and all that stuff. So the whole process was very different than it is today. But yeah, there was this hope, like in my heart, that something was going to happen. Like someone was going to discover us, or we were going to write this thing, and it was going to be epic. And all of a sudden, we were going to be, you know, playing on these stages to hundreds of thousands of people.
Did you get any backlash from your parents at all when you?
They were. Yeah, I mean, a little bit. They were always pretty cool in terms of like, you know, like they got me into music. My mom was very much about always sort of excited about the fact that we were interested in things like art. Like, I think my mom knew I wasn't like a mathematics kid. Like, I liked reading books, and I liked, drawing pictures, and I liked playing music. And so, because what happened was my parents' basement became our rehearsal space. So we got lucky in that, for some reason, the way my parents put an addition onto their house and the way it was built, the only way you could get into the basement was by leaving the house and going out back. So the basement was actually completely separate from the house. And I mean, it was connected to the house, but it was like you couldn't get to it in that sense. So we had like basically a key in our own door. So like we could, if we wanted to practice, if the guys were like, let's practice at 10 o'clock tonight. So we soundproofed the room. We went to Home Depot pretending we knew how to do any of that stuff. And
wow.
We bought the things and we soundproofed this room, and it just sort of became our spot. Like, we'd go and practice. I would go down there late at night and play our drummer's drum set and stuff, just because it was fun to dick around. I could go, if we weren't practicing, I could go down there and work on stuff. We had like a shitty little tape 4-track that I would use and try to write stuff. And so it became like this. I always had access to it. I didn't have to go to a rehearsal space ever if I wanted to just like sit down and play. And that was huge, I think, for us.
Did you demo songs? With the 4-track? Would you write songs and like on late night on your own and just be like, I got an idea, I'm gonna run downstairs and just start demoing stuff? Yeah,
all the time. And that's how we did a lot of it. Like, a lot of the writing came out. I would say a lot of the writing came out of me or our bass player Steve. We would have like an initial thing, and then we'd bring it to the rest of the band, and we'd sort of develop it from there. That kind of became our writing style.
When would you say you got your confidence in like your voice and your sound? Like, what you said this whole time, you're trying to find it. I mean, you've got a strong fucking voice, and it's like very loud. Yeah, it's excellent. And I remember when we saw you guys play, that really stood out to me. That, like, how tight you guys were, the guitar sound, like just the songs in general. I'm like, fuck, these guys are solid. But you have a very strong voice, and you said that you were still trying to find it. At what point did you actually find it and then think to yourself, okay, I'm a singer, like I'm confident in my, because it's got to be two things too. It's got to be, I can sing, but I also can write. Did that come at the same time, or was there one before the other?
Yeah, it was. You know what it was is, it's funny. This sort of gets back to the first year of college. So this is going to be a long-winded way of answering that question.
Go for it. Go for it. We got time.
So my freshman year of college, I'm in the computer lab, because we had those back then, because there were only like 5 computers connected to the internet at that time. And I'm sitting next to this kid, and he's desperately trying to like do a layout in Photoshop. And I'd been toying with it a little bit. And this is, kind of, I became the de facto graphic artist in the band with our drummer. Like, he and I would split stuff up. But we start talking. He's asking me how to do something, and we start talking. And it turns out like he's doing a cover for his band's like new EP. So we start talking. I tell him that I'm in a band, and his name's Ben, and the band. He gives me a copy of the CD, and this band is called Arcane. They later end up becoming the Dillinger Escape Plan.
Jesus.
And so he and I start talking. We become kind of friendly, and he I tell him that we're trying to record an album, and he goes, well, we recorded at the studio called Tracks East, and he's like, we loved it. And so I listen to I get a copy of their CD, I go home and listen to it. I'm like, holy shit, this sounds amazing. So I call my brother, who was like, at that point, he had graduated college, and he's living in Pittsburgh, and he and I are like, we're best pals. I got to the age where like he and I were actually friends. And I was like, yeah, have you heard about this studio? And he's like, yeah. He's like, that band that you really love. He gave me a CD by this band, Dead Guy, when I was younger, and I loved them. And he's like, they recorded their album there too. And I was like, oh my God. And I'm like, we got to go. I got to find out. So I just call, back in the day, you just call a recording studio. Like, look them up in the phone book, find their number, make a phone call. And I called and I booked. I basically said, we want to come in and record 3 songs. I didn't like request any specific engineer or anything. I just said, we want to, how much is it going to cost? And I forget what it was. I think we were there for 2 days. So it ended up being like, I want to say like, $800 a day or something. Mm-hmm. So let's say like it was $1,500. We scraped together what little money we had. And we went in and we got there. And I remember it was above an auto parts store. and we're standing outside waiting, and we see this dude walking down the street in the other direction. He's got he just looks like a total metalhead nerd, and we make fun of him. And then he walks into a 7-Eleven, comes out, and then walks back up the street, and he's like, "Hey guys, are you the band?" And we're like, "Oh shit." We're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Hey, I'm Steve." And so
I'm Steve Evans.
yeah. And we're like, "Oh my god." And he's the the nicest guy on the planet. And we come in, and he sets up. There's a big live room. We go in, and we had practiced. We'd rehearsed with no vocals, so we knew all the parts. We recorded 3 songs that day. 2 ended up going on the first 7-inch we released, and 1 actually never went anywhere. It's just sort of I think it was on a benefit comp, and it's really hard to find. And so we recorded them, without vocals. And I remember we did the first song. I remember we came out after the first full take we got, and we sat in the control room, and he played it. And hearing it come through the speakers, we were all just like, "Holy shit!" We're like, "We sound like a real band. This is insane." And then I went into the solo booth to do vocals, and I was just really fucking nervous. And I did the first take, and we got to the point in the song where I really have to belt it out, and I did it, and we stop, and I'm done with the take. I get through it, and we stop, and he comes over the thing, he pushes the button, he's like, "Hey man, I just want you to know," he's like, "you have an insane voice." He goes, "You are awesome." And that was hearing him say that, just someone who I respected purely by the work that they had done without ever knowing him.
Yeah.
That just, it all of a sudden gave me this confidence that I hadn't had before. And he really worked with me on that, even those first 3 songs where he was just explaining to me how to hit certain syllables, and he really became more of an engineer and more of a producer in that sense, where, we just felt like Steve's our guy, and we only want to record with him. We only ever did. We recorded those 3 songs. We went back and did another 3, went back and did a final 3, and a smattering of those ended up going on our first EP. One of those songs got put on one of the Emo Diaries, I think Chapter 3, which he took the rights to, so we couldn't do anything with that forever.
The Emo Diaries label?
Yeah, the Deep Elm guy.
Deep Elm,
he was he had a thing where it was if you give us a song, you can't do anything with it for 5 years or something. So, but yeah, so that was that was the moment when Steve Evans told me that I could sing. I was like, okay, now hearing other people tell me that, I didn't believe it, but when he told me, I was like, okay, I kind of believe it now.
Did you find that when there's a moment where you hit a high note or a very loud note, that it's almost this, what's the word, very deep part of you, that all this built up frustration and bullshit that you have, it's released within that note?
Yeah.
And did you ever find that, so you found that that happened to you? Yeah,
there were moments where you sing, so it's there are moments where you feel really good about it, and then there were some shows where I would go in and belt it out, and I could tell that it was coming from my stomach and not my throat, and it just felt good. But a lot of that had to do with the vibe of the show. It was good energy at the show, good friends were there, the room felt great. And then we'd go to other shows, and the vibe would be shitty, and we'd just play shitty, or we'd mess up early on in the set, and something would just throw it, and we'd just have a shitty show, and I couldn't sing, and it was just, you never knew. I hated that inconsistency about playing. It's you didn't know from one show to the next. Sometimes you'd feel great, and other times we'd leave a show being well, that fucking sucks, we should never do this ever again. It was you just didn't know.
I actually had a ritual before shows. If I felt great about the show, it would always go downhill. And there was always a certain shirt that I would wear, or a style of shirt. It's so stupid, but it was almost like hockey players who put on the left skate first and then the right one, or or you put the left sock on. It's just these weird things. So I remember always before a show would happen, I'd be like, okay, I'm ready to leave. I need to wear that shirt, and I don't want to think about the show.
Yeah, it was we had this superstition where when it started to become a thing where we would all as a group only wear white V-neck T-shirts when we played a show. It became our joking thing. Down to there was this other band we used to play with a lot, The Assistant, and they would all wear black T-shirts, and we did like a little mini tour with them, and it was like that was our thing. It was like we only wore white T-shirts, they only wore black T-shirts. But yeah, it was like that was our superstition. It was, I remember like sometimes somebody would show up in not a white T-shirt, and we'd like have to stop at like a fucking Walmart and buy like one of those Hanes three packs, get them in a white T-shirt. The show isn't gonna go as planned, you know.
Yeah. Did you guys? Was there a moment I remember playing, especially going on the whole, good and bad shows.
Yeah.
There would be a moment, I think by the first song, I just knew if it was going to go completely downhill or if it was going to kick ass.
Yeah.
Did you find that as well?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you get a sense of that immediately. Like some of our best shows, there were like, 10 people there, but it was just much more about the vibe. Like there was a show, I think there was a show we played that I loved, and I think it was with you guys. Maybe it was in West Orange or something.
That was our show we played with you guys.
Yeah, and I just like, that was a great show. That show felt great. And I remember some of it was also like, I always felt like we'd walk in, we'd look at the situation and go, if the shittier the venue, like the better it was. We used to have this thing too, like if there was a stage, we wouldn't play on it. We'd set up on the floor.
Really?
Yeah.
You wanted to be within the crowd. You wanted to have that vibe surrounding you. It's like you were all one.
Yeah. And sometimes that worked to our advantage, and sometimes it was a terrible idea because like the sound guy would be like, well, then you can't use the PA.
Really?
Like, oh, okay. Yeah. But we got to a point where our amps were so goddamn loud. We would just be like, just run the vocals through the PA. We don't need your goddamn PA. And that's also why I think our drummer hit so hard, is because I don't know what the deal was back then. Like we were all, in our 20s, and we had totally unnecessarily loud amplifiers.
Oh, yeah.
Like these 100-watt tube amps with these 4x2. I just think about what we dragged around as kids for these shows, these totally unnecessary pieces of equipment.
Well, I was always afraid that no one in the back could hear it if you had like a combo amp.
I know. That's how I felt too.
And every time a band went on stage with combo amps, I'm like, idiots.
It's true. I don't know what it was. It was like a thing. It was really funny.
What?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Go ahead.
You will go when I tell you to talk.
I was going to say, it's funny, like, and then years later, moving to Brooklyn, and like I live 2 blocks from the Williamsburg Music Hall in Williamsburg, and like you go see these like great bands play, and they show up and they've got like these tiny little combo amps and they sound amazing. And I ended up buying one recently, just for my house, because I don't have any need for my giant. I still have all of my equipment, but it's all sort of packed away in storage. But I don't have. I have 2 kids. I can't plug my 100-watt tube amp in and just lightly play some guitar. So, but it's funny now. Like I see bands playing, and I sort of coming to Brooklyn. I ended up there's a scene of like New Jersey and Long Island and New York and Delaware musicians that I've all run into here. Like I met so many guys whose old bands that Penfold has played with in the past, just around Brooklyn. Like you walk down the street and, like I'll walk down the street and run into like Jeff from Thursday or,
oh, wow.
Or, I met up with, it's funny. I hired this guy at where I work, and it turned out like one of his best friends is a dude whose band I played with in Delaware. Like one of the first shows Penfold played was with Dillinger Escape Plan, and his band was called Joshua Fit for Battle, and they opened up. And
oh my God.
And he's a designer. I hired him freelance one time, and then he and I ended up sharing a studio space together. And then, that studio space, you meet like Artie from Airtype 11, who's like one of the owners over at St. Vitus. So there's like this weird little scene of like everybody kind of all knows each other and works together. I ended up through a bunch of random friends, becoming friendly with this guy Mike, who used to be in I Am the Avalanche, and he owns a bar in Bushwick now, and like we see each other around town. There's like this weird little community of musicians I think we'd all still like to be playing music in some form, but so we I started.
Now you're all like have
with
kids and like families and shit. Yeah.
And we'll all start like a band for 3 weeks, and then by like the third practice, we're like, we don't have time for this.
There's a different vibe too, because when you're younger, that's all you had to do, and you didn't have responsibility. You didn't have really didn't have a job that you loved. Hopefully people have jobs they love now, but you didn't have a wife or a serious girlfriend that you wanted to spend time with, or it's also there's a point now where it's kind of a chore.
Yeah.
It's like it's almost like going to the gym. You hate going there, but once you're in it, you're like, okay, I'm there, and then afterwards you feel like that was great. I love that I did that. But then the vibe, and then the next time of going, you're like, oh man, fuck, Tuesday night at like 8. I want to be in bed by 9:30.
Yeah, exactly.
What bands would you say at that time did you start influencing your sound? Because you guys definitely took on I remember, so speaking of that West Orange show, that was the first time I saw you guys. That was, I believe, so Chris from my band, he put that show on. I think that was the first show he put on. It was you guys opened up, and then I think, and he's gonna fucking kill me for this, either that was you guys, us, Bigwig, and somebody else, or it was you guys, the Broadways, Tuesday, and us.
No, it was the first thing you said, because later the Broadway's Tuesday thing was I randomly, this dude from Chicago who was like a big Penfold fan, he reached out to me because he was trying to book some shows for those guys, and I think I reached out to you to get help. So I think that was like the second time we played together.
Okay.
Or I reached out to
Chris.
Maybe it was Chris or something.
Chris got you on the show.
Yeah. And so the Broadways and the Tuesday guys were like, or it was, I forget how it all went down, but I think that was the second time we played with you guys.
Yeah, that
was a fun show too.
That was the show that Chris put on. He's gonna fucking text me after this and be like, dude, you're wrong.
I might be wrong.
He does it all the time. But yeah, I remember hearing your sound, and there was a lot of times back then we were playing so many shows that sometimes bands would play, and I just, I wasn't into them, or I'd be outside talking to a lot of people because I loved socializing. But there was something about it. I remember walking in and I heard you guys play, and it stopped me because I thought, damn, these guys don't sound like anybody else. They are, and I was really big into emo at the time, and it reminded me very much of Mineral. And we were big, and Get Up Kids had we were getting into the Get Up Kids at that point, but Mineral was a band that Barker from Lane Meyer, he got me into those guys, and I loved this. Their sound was, the lyrics were great, the melody was strong, their guitar sound was just like a tank. And when I walked in, I heard that from you guys, and I think I might have went up to you or Rich after and geeked out. I'm like, oh my god, I fucking love you guys. You guys are so good. And but your sound from those bands, like, what were the bands that actually finally influenced the sound that you guys came up with?
It's funny. I think there's definitely some of that. It started out, so I'll go back because my timeline now feels all messed up, but I'll keep walking through it. But so I was saying before, I used to tape 120 minutes. Somewhere in high school, I was watching like an episode of 120 minutes, and I saw the video for 7 by Sunny Day Real Estate.
Oh, yeah.
And I immediately, like, the next day I went to the mall and I went to Sam Goody, and you walk in, you go to the CD section. Of course, they don't have it. And I remember going up to the desk because I wanted to see if they could special order it, because I knew it was Sub Pop, because MTV used to say what label it was on when they showed you the fucking credit thing. And so I asked the guy, and he's like, we actually have a copy here on cassette. And I was like, oh shit. So I ran over to the cassette thing, and I found it, and I bought Diary. And I wore that fucking thing out. Yeah. And to me, that was like, in my mind, hearing that music, hearing that sort of dynamic of a sound where you could go from, like I said before, I sort of heard that in Nirvana, but I hadn't heard it like this. And I hadn't heard it in a way where, like, like Dave Grohl's an incredible drummer, but fucking William Goldsmith from Sunny Day was doing, like, there was this weird, like, technicality to it that I hadn't heard before either. Like, I felt like I could listen to bands and figure out guitar parts, but I would listen to Sunny Day and be like, I don't know what they're playing, and it's driving me fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And I loved that about it. And so I think that was sort of what set me down this path of where our sound started to go. And then I feel like everybody bought their influences a little bit. Like our bass player was just like, all he listened to was the Smiths. And so like I think he wanted his vibe was like, can we get a little more shoegazery? And so like, I think he brought sort of we had a lot of songs that were like slow. So I feel like he brought a lot of that to it.
He definitely had a very Morrissey look. I remember when he played, I was like, this guy is definitely, he definitely is a Smiths fan.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He would have, if he could have been Morrissey, he would have
dated Morrissey himself and been asexual.
Yeah, probably. And so, and then I think we started getting into like, we had this very good friend, John Cafaro. He was like our band photographer, merch guy. He came to everything with us, and he was also really good at finding like random bands and stuff. And so I remember he made me a tape one day, and it had like some Weston songs, and I had known Weston through my brother, but he was just made a mixtape of stuff, and it had like Texas Is the Reason and the Get Up Kids, and this is like, I think Texas and Get Up Kids didn't even have full lengths out at this point. It was just like a tape pulled of shit from their first EPs or 7 inches and stuff. Yeah. And just like a bunch of those, I started to hear bands that sounded like our band a little bit more. And I just, or more in that style. And I was like, I didn't know all these bands existed. And so I got, we heard Mineral. But it's funny, like, I feel like a lot of people compared us to Mineral. And I think I definitely hear the similar, it's harder for me because we were writing the music where I'm like, we don't sound like anybody else, but of course we did. But yeah, I think like there was some influence of that. There was some influence of Sunny Day. There was, and then I also think like it was hard for us to completely get away from like the roots of what the stuff we started listening to. Like, one of my favorite bands also from that Sunny Day Real Estate era was Hum.
Oh yeah, dude.
Yeah.
That guitar sound, I could see the influence.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I think it was, like I just love, everything we did was drop D tuning. So like there was like a mix of all that stuff, I think, and just kind of playing along to that. And then, so to answer, I think one of the questions you asked earlier, as I started going to college and I met the dude in Dillinger, and we recorded our first 3 songs, and we had like a demo tape. Our guitar player was going to, I think, like William Patterson or something like that. And our bass player, I don't even remember, maybe Montclair State. So we're all like, we're going to stay at local colleges. We all sort of organized our schedules. So most of our classes were like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we could like basically leave town Friday, play 3 shows and be back Monday kind of thing. Our bass player became friendly with this dude, and he invited us to go see a show at, I want to say it was a Rockaway VFW hall.
Okay.
And it was you and I, this hardcore band.
Yep.
And it was, and another band I'm not going to remember. And then the band that played last was the Blacktop Cadence, which was the dude from Hot Water Music side project.
Oh,
Chris Waller's side project.
Yeah.
And they put out 1 record. It's a really good record, but I had all the Penfold like demo tapes with me at that show, and so I started handing them out, and all of a sudden we started getting asked to play shows. So like it was just like, I think we got to this place where like we found there's like a scene here, and we found these people, and we really just hadn't been a part of it before that. Like we were playing clubs, and we were playing the student center, and we were getting, but we hadn't really tapped into the fact that there was this scene. And I think that's what college kind of did for us, which is like, if I got anything from college, it was like I made connections around the band, because I certainly didn't learn all that much. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so that's what it was good for. But so that was the beginning of that, and then As a result, I think word started getting spread a little bit, and this dude who went to Rutgers heard our tape, and he called us up, and he was going to start a record label. His roommate ran Trustkill Records.
Yep.
And he was basically like, this kid, his name was Kyle White. And he's like, I want to start a little record label. My roommate's going to help me. And I want to put your guys' record out first. He's like, I'm going to do yours first. And then I think he ended up putting out some hardcore band after that. That ended up being all we put out. But we did our first 7-inch with him. And I
think I have that 7-inch. I think I still have that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the one with James Dean on the cover.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's I think it's called Your Eyes Have All the Answers.
Very emo.
And yeah, totally. And so we went, like, Josh, who runs Trustkill, he designed the art, because at that point, like, I had never physically designed like a printed thing. Everything I'd done had been like a website design or something like that. And so I went to his house with this guy, and we laid out the record cover in some weird like page maker program, back in the day, and we got it pressed. And I remember the first show we had it at was we opened up for Sam I Am at the Melody Bar, and that was our release of the 7-inch.
Wow.
Which was cool. And then but because of that and because of the demo, we just started getting into this scene. But it was so exciting to realize that there were like other people out there who cared. And I think, it's funny to be on the Facebook group for New Jersey Pop Punk and just remember a lot of those shows, going to those shows, playing those shows, and see, the cool thing is people really were accepting, like, regardless of exactly what you sounded like. If you look at those flyers, it goes from like an emo band to a ska band to a punk band to like a hardcore band, and it kind of it was a lot more about the community of it than it was like, who specifically is playing, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I love that aspect of it. The only time I ever felt that there was maybe a divide in a show, I went to a show one time at the Boonton Knights of Columbus, and Uprise ended up coming in. They were a hardcore band, and they played last. Actually, super funny, that guy Mike Ziobro I was talking about with the so he was actually a guitar player for that band, and he got into hardcore. He joined them. And I remember we're in high school, and he's like, yeah, we have a 7-inch out. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean? You have something recorded on vinyl? This is amazing. And I thought they were, I was like, oh my God, they're so huge. So they ended up playing a show, and I felt that the rest of the show was very pop punk ska based. And when these guys went on, they brought their hardcore crew, and it was a different vibe. I just stood back, and I'm looking at this, and I think there was one part of a breakdown with 40 people just started doing a floor punch in unison.
Oh, jeez.
And it was the first time I saw it, and I started laughing my ass off because it was it wasn't like funny. It was just like, I don't know what I'm seeing right now, and I can't compute what's happening, so I'm just going to start laughing. And but then I felt like in that sense, I'm not going to go into this whole conversation about that, but I know what you mean about feeling that. And I felt like later on, I think it was harder for maybe a hardcore band to come in because they had such a tough sound, and I felt the other sounds were more inviting.
Yeah,
and a hardcore sound is. I was watching a Snapcase video the other day when they got back together, and they're playing, and the vibe is so intense and so aggressive, and I love that. I love listening to that music, but you kind of show up where you're ready to release this, and you're not smiling. Right. Back then, but when we were, it's like emo and pop punk and ska, like it was fun and happy, and like the emo style was kind of like bummed out, but you were like, but I felt like that was more encompassing vibe where it did create that fishbowl of unison.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, there were definitely shows where we were clearly the outsider, but we felt that way. And I think there were a lot of moments where we weren't sure if we fit in.
You guys looked like that sometimes on stage where you'd play, and I felt that it was the four of you kind of looking at each other like, I think it's going to be just the four of us right now. And then when I'm looking at, I remember you guys played at Garfield's. It was the Garfield American Legion, And my favorite song, and I'm gonna get into this in a bit, but my favorite song was "I'll Take You Everywhere" because the break in at the end was so fucking insanely awesome that I remember I was just watching you guys going ape shit on the outside, and my friends are looking at me, laughing at me because I was like, I don't fucking care, like I love this band.
Yeah.
But everyone was watching you guys and they had smiles, they loved it. But I felt that you guys would leave and people would walk up to you and say like, "Hey, good job," and you were kind of like, "Oh, okay, thank you."
Yeah.
Like you didn't know, you didn't understand that people liked
awkward.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, we were so awkward, and that was like the hardest thing for us was, I mean, I look back. It's so funny because years later, after Penfold broke up, years later, me and two of the other guys started another band. And we put out an EP. We actually like signed with Engineer. Yeah.
More? Yeah.
Yeah. And we basically broke up right after we finished the record. But we would like playing shows with that band was so different because like we were older and our personalities had just, I think, come out in a much different way. We're like, I always say like I wish we knew kind of what we knew about things earlier on because we were so awkward and uncomfortable. Like we were always the band that we finished playing. We're like, we should probably go. Like nobody wants us here. We should probably go. we weren't unfriendly. We were all very nice guys, but we weren't like outgoing in the way where we were gonna like go up to anybody and talk or like try to sell ourselves in any way. We just kind of like we did our thing and then we left, and I think that hurt us in a lot of ways too. Like we didn't know how to sell ourselves.
I don't think though. I the one thing I would say is that I don't remember, and I don't ever think that anyone ever thought of you guys like, well, fuck these guys. They're not staying around to talk. Like I think that's the one thing that I don't think that you guys ever had that vibe, or people ever had that vibe for you guys. But it was definitely apparent that what you're saying is, yeah, like you guys were definitely quiet and weren't at, because everyone else, we'd all be laughing and being stupid and stuff. And I think Rich, I remember talking to Rich because he was like that.
Yeah, he was a goofball. Yeah.
He was a super goofy dude, and I loved that. And so I think I talked to Steve as well a couple times, but Mike I never got a chance to talk to. You occasionally, but you were like a quiet guy. But I think those guys kind of added that element that you think you were missing. They definitely knew how to sit and talk, and people could, connect with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely apparent that you guys kind of felt like, oh, did you hate the fact that people called you like the emo band?
Yeah, kind of. I think but only because I think we were trained. Like that became the thing at the time. Is like emo's a bad word.
Yeah.
And we heard that word for the first time. I think I remember we played early on. We played a show up at Quinnipiac in Connecticut, and like we did a little interview on the radio station. And the DJ was this girl, and she called us an emo band, and we were like, what is that? and that's kind of how we uncovered what that was. I think we used to call ourselves like math rock or post-hardcore or something because we didn't know what it was, but that sounded like such a mouthful. So then we were like, oh, emo, that's easy to say. And then, months later, someone was like, oh, no, you don't want to be called an emo band. That's bad. Like,
yeah, it almost became like a joke to certain people. Like, oh, you're emo. Even to this day, people are like, oh, you're being really emo right now. Like, ugh.
So, but I mean, I don't know. I think it's like, it's fine. It sort of helps people get a sense of what they're about to hear. Like it bothered me sometimes, and then other times it really didn't. And I don't know.
What were the majority of your songs about?
So I think this is kind of interesting. So I feel like the first songs we recorded, I was a kid. I was 15, 16 when we wrote these songs, and so I didn't have like these heavy emotional things happening in my life in a way where I necessarily needed to put them into song. Like I had one girlfriend. We started dating in high school. We were together for like 3 or 4 years. Like there was nothing dramatic in my life happening where I needed to be like penning these songs about like lost loves and things like that. So early on, a lot of the lyrics in the songs were based around like short stories I read.
Really?
So they were like would take something from a story and try to like turn it into my versioning of it, like how I saw it. And I was really into reading, you know, I was really into literature. So I was reading a lot. And so I would take those things and be like, okay, I'm going to sort of write my vision of what this, you know, here's a story that meant a lot to me. I'm going to sort of personify it, internalize it, and then turn it into words.
Wow.
It wasn't until sort of the last batch of songs we recorded, which ended up going on that first EP. There was a song M, and that was about my cousin. Her name, well, I say was, she's obviously still around. Her name is Emily. And so M was just short for that. And so that song was specifically about the fact that her dad basically, like, you know, disappeared before she was born.
Oh, wow.
Just decided like he didn't want to be a part of the family. And so that was like, you know, a little bit of my like an ode to, you know, the fact that you've got this huge family of people who care about you, and it doesn't matter that your dad's a piece of shit kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the song that, you know, basically became everybody's favorite song, which was I'll Take You Everywhere.
It's so good. It's such a great fucking song.
That one was about, like, I think this was probably, like, this all culminated around, like, what I would consider to be sort of the most emotional time in my life, which was the thing happening with my cousin. Because I never really understood, like, families have turmoil. You know, like, I felt like my parents were very good at protecting me from all the bullshit that, like, bigger family bullshit that we dealt with. They were like, you know, just be a kid, just enjoy life, and we'll hide all of these dark secrets that our family has from you. And so, like, that came out about, you know, my uncle and him leaving the family. And then at the same time, like, I think my brother and I had we got really close. And then that's when he basically told me he was moving to Pittsburgh, which is not very close. So he was going to be gone, and I wasn't going to see him, like, you know, except on holidays, which really bummed me out. And literally that week when he was leaving, one of my best friends on the planet, his dad and I was very close with his family. His dad just, like, up and died. And so, like, all culminated in this idea of, like, how fleeting some of the important relationships we have are. And you just don't know, you know, in that moment, you just don't know if you're going to see that person the next day or not. And so that became, like, you know, that whole thought of, like, if you were here, if I had this second chance, I would do everything I possibly could do with you. And that was sort of the impetus for I'll Take You Everywhere. And then all the other songs were just, like, you know, like I said, they were sort of, like, based on short stories and kind of just weird. But, like, you know, so a lot of it was, like, you know, a lot of the songs were sort of like my thinking on, you know, politically what was happening in the world. Without, you know, it was like a political message hitting in an emo song or stuff like that. And so they kind of went all over the place. And then sorry, go ahead.
Did you find, though, that there was the song, because when I would hear about bands writing songs, like, I always loved it. You know, my first part of songwriting was my buddy, you know, Chris. I always talk about Chris. Him writing, because he always wrote it about things that it was always about a girl. He always had to attach it to a girl. So I was like, oh man, I always have to attach my feelings to a girl. Yeah. And then I would hear about later on in life was bands like Coheed and Cambria, where he just made up a comic book in his head and of these two characters, and it was all these fake stories. And I felt that I couldn't attach myself to that, because I'm like, this isn't real. Like, there's nothing real. So with you writing these songs about the stories that you read, but then the real life things, did you find that two things? One, did people connect towards a song that was based on a real thing, and that more than that wasn't? And the second question is that, did you find when you sang these songs live and played them, you had a different emotion behind it that was stronger than the other?
Yeah, that's I think 100% became the case. So, you know, the songs people resonated with the most, especially early on, were, you know, I'll Take You Everywhere. There's that song Microchip that was on the Emo Diaries comp, which was, you know, very much about, like, it was like, that was a song about a girl, effectively. And those ones just seem to resonate with people more, because I think I think when we played them, we put more emotion into them. Whereas, you know, there's a couple of other songs that I think, you know, they ended up sort of representing something later on, to us or to me, where like I think they kind of picked back up. But it's funny, like the full length, the actual full length that we recorded, for me that was a very cathartic experience, because we wrote it right after my grandfather died, and so that entire record is just basically about coming to terms with that idea of like what it means for people to die. And like, it's basically, that whole record was written under the duress of that scenario and everything that happened in my life, where like every one of those songs is very personal and has a very personal meaning. We didn't play them quite as much because we didn't last as long as a band after that record came out. Like we, the other songs were around for longer and we played them more often. But when we did like a couple of little reunion things here and there, and we got back together, it was hard to like re-engage with some of those songs, where like we a few of them were just like, fuck it, we're not going to play these. This is too tough. And also some of it was that like we didn't know how to play them anymore, but some of it was they were tough to kind of wrap our heads around again. Like there was once, also I feel like that record, like the rest of the band got a lot more involved too. Like our drummer wrote the lyrics to one of the songs that was about like, his a relationship he had, and so I was singing the words that he wrote, and like,
was that weird?
Yeah, it was a little bit, but I understood how. I feel like the band's friendship was always very strong. Like I think we were able to get to a point where we realized that regardless of what happened with the band, we're always going to be friends. And I think understanding how much it meant to him that these were his words. And to be totally honest, like the shitty thing I did is like I changed a bunch of them, but I tried to keep it grounded in what he gave me. Like he gave me a lot of words, but the song didn't require that many words. So I pick and chose what made sense. So it was based on lyrics he gave me. It wasn't exactly the words he gave me. But it also became like a song he didn't want to play anymore after a while, and and we all respected that, and we didn't play it.
Interesting.
And I think we all had respect for each other in a lot of ways. I think we all, we fought a lot and we all got upset with each other. But we were also really good at like hiding our emotions, so we wouldn't tell each other when we were upset. Like I've seen a lot of bands who would have these full blowouts. Basically, the drummer and the bass player would fight because they were brothers. Like they grew up having blowouts, but when we were mad at each other, we would like keep it in for as long as possible until it hit that point where you couldn't anymore. Which is, I think those were the moments when we like, we probably had a couple of moments where we're like, we're breaking up, and then we didn't. But I do remember the distinct. We played a show we went out and played. I forget where it was, somewhere in Ohio. There was like a fest we went and played, and that was like, we played that show, and on the way home we were just kind of like, let's not do this anymore, in the van. And,
let's not do the band, or let's not play a show in Ohio.
Yeah, no, let's not do the band anymore. Like it was like, I think we had reached a limit. We were like trying to write new songs and nothing was coming out. That it was tough for me too, because the album at that point, the second record had been out long enough where like I could send a CD and a letter to a venue or a booking agent, and we would get a show. Like we're at that level where like it wasn't as hard to get a show. Like there were some people knew the name a little bit. Like I could send it, I could call back and they'd be like, yeah, we have an opening this date. So like actually booking was getting easier. And so that was frustrating for me too. Cause I think me and Mike, who was the drummer, we were always the ones who were like, let's keep it going. We can figure it out. We can make it work. And like Steve was going to get his master's and he wanted to focus on school. And, Rich was working and he wasn't really sure what he wanted to do. He was working at a recording studio in New York and it was eating up all his time. And he really wanted to focus on learning that craft. And so there were like, we all had reasons why we didn't want to do it. But I feel like even in those dire moments, the drummer and I were always kind of like, no, fuck it. Let's figure it out. Let's make it work. But I think we hit that point where on the way home from that show, like, nobody wanted to do it. Then we spent probably 3 weeks fighting over email about whether or not we should do it. And then we just kind of decided to end it.
Do you ever notice that bands, they put so much pressure behind it, almost as if you can't stop. You can't take a break because if you do, it's just going to fall apart. And you think that pressure has something to do with bands breaking up. It's just like, well, we're not allowed to stop. And if someone's like, I really need a fucking break, and you're like, well, suck it up.
Yeah, no, it's like you do. You get a week break, and everyone would be like, "Was that enough fucking time for you? Can we start playing again now? Are we all cool? Great, let's get back to it." Yeah, but I think, there's resentment that people have for each other. They hold it there's a lot of things that I'm sure, other guys in the band would say, like, oh, I'm resentful of the fact that you made me, you convinced me to play a show I didn't want to play when I had this thing going on, or or you backed out of a show we all really wanted to play when it was like really important, and you couldn't do it because you thought your fucking date night with your girlfriend that we all knew was garbage. It's like more important. There's probably like a lot of those moments where that I don't even remember at this point, because I don't, in the grand scheme of things, I don't resent any of it. I am grateful for the time I got to spend, making music with these guys. And I'm actually, as I'm sitting here talking about it, I'm grateful for you having this conversation with me, because it's bringing up all sorts of old feelings that I haven't thought about in a long time. So.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's one of the reasons I love this is, for me, I always get a high off of these, because I'd rather just be doing this. Like, I have my own company. And I'm like starting to hate it, because I feel like I feel like I'm showing up to force something on people that they don't want. Like, it's like, here, get this video for your company and you have to do this. But with this, it's, the moment I started it, it was, what did I used to love? I never stopped loving music. And I always think about the past. Not that it hinders me from moving forward in my life. I just kept everything that I learned with me at all times. And that's why I do work for myself. And it's almost as if I kept those. I have asked a couple people, like, your punk rock ethics, but that's how I defined them as. It was just doing your own thing.
Yeah.
And so I get such a high off of having these conversations, because there's such this like box of an hour and a half where we get to like think about this. And after this, you're probably going to think more about shit.
Oh, definitely.
And it's such a cool thing to have people love that. And then people listening to it are getting that too. And I'm like, man, I didn't expect that to happen.
Yeah.
But it's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I sort of, in preparation for talking to you, I was listening to some of the other ones, and it's been awesome to just hear all these points of views, like hearing Heath from XSDB talk about just what it was like dealing with booking all of these bands, and just like, that point of view, you forget that, I mean, at least as one of the members of the band, you forget that there were people that cared enough, that didn't play music, that actually wanted to figure out how to bring music to all the other kids in the community. Like, that was such a huge part of it. And like,
oh yeah,
sort of, definitely, I imagine to some degree a very thankless job.
Oh
so,
yeah.
but so I really appreciate that they were like, I just remember, all of there were a couple of times where we had friends in touring bands who would be coming through, and I'd be like, I don't have a show for you, but I will. Like, we're going to turn the Penfold rehearsal space into a show. Like, let's clear out the basement and we'll have a fucking show in my basement. And yeah, we can only fit 20 kids in there, but whoever shows up, we'll fucking figure it out. And I love that there are people who are always trying to do that.
Did you ever take that? Cool. Did you ever hold on to that though? I mean, this is kind of it kind of goes along with it, but it gets, I don't know, it might get a little weird with this question, but the biggest thing I've learned about reading about successful people or bands that were successful or just people in general is that there's always this theme of they just thought about it all the time as if it was real.
Yeah.
And then the moment I was talking to Josh from Humble, and in his one thing he brought up was, once you set a date for something, it becomes 100% real, and then everything just starts lining up. Like Forever Endeavor just did a reunion show, and he said, Casey booked a date, it made it real, we're going to do it. And what made me think about that is two things. One, when we were talking earlier about being kids and just nonstop imagining what our life would be like as these rock stars, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then the second is bands come to town, and everyone thinks of, oh my God, what are we gonna do? We fuck with, it's fucked up. But then you're saying it's like, well, let's just set something in motion and decide it, and then it's gonna be this awesome experience. And I think people forget that, and they forget how easy it is just to say, okay, well, hold on. we're in a shit situation, you know, in this scenario, you guys are in town, there's no place to play. Hey man, like let's think about it for a second. All right, yeah, let's fucking clear out the basement. Let's throw a show. And that's probably one of the, you know, I'm guessing it might be the worst show ever, but those are the shows I felt were always the best ones because it was something came out of it. Maybe it wasn't that the band sold a lot of merch, but you built this awesome relationship with them, or maybe two kids were there that weren't supposed to be there, and then they met at that show, and now they're married, and they had this great like experience, this life together, you know. It's like I just felt that all these things came about from things like that, but you know, but I think it's like sometimes it's just set something, you know, like don't freak out about it, but just set it in motion and say this is what's going to happen. We're fucking doing it.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think we suffered from. There was a moment where I think we got to this place where, and I know, I mean, like I've listened to some of the other ones you've done. I think a lot of bands talk about this. Like, there becomes this sense of jealousy that like other bands are getting to a place and your band isn't. Yeah. And like, you know, I just remember like playing a show where Thursday opened up for us, and then like, you know, 6 months later we're playing a show opening for them, and they're like signed to a label, and they're taking and be like, what the fuck? Why are those guys making it and we're not? And I think there's something about like we had this expectation that like other people were going to do the work for us, or there was this hope that like, well, we'll get a booking agent, or we'll get a manager, or a manager's going to want to work with us. But like, and we wanted to just be writing and performing the music and not dealing with all the other stuff. And I think that hurt us in a lot of ways. Where, you know, it's funny, years later. This is probably, I guess this was 2012 or 2013. These two labels, one out of Chicago and one in New Jersey, re-released all of our stuff on vinyl, like limited edition vinyl. And as a result, they asked us if we would get back together and play a show. And that was one of those things where like I called the guys and I was like, hey, we haven't fucking played in like 12 years. Do you guys want to do it? And I think something about us all being adults and understanding responsibility much more, and just being like, yeah, let's set it up and do it. And we did it, and it worked, and it was great. And I think at the time, like, just not understanding that, not like really grasping the concept of like, if you want to make something happen, you have to set a plan and do it. And like, that's, you know, I basically, I run a pretty large organization now for my job. Like, you know, I'm a partner at a company of like 150 people. Like that, I have to do that every day, or people won't have jobs anymore. It's like it's a very different point of view to have than you do when you're a kid, which is, you know, just kind of like it's all going to work out to our advantage. Somebody else is going to set it up. We just have to show up and play and leave. And you know, and I think that's part of the reason why I think we never really. I don't think we tried as hard as we could have. Like I look back.
What would you have done different? What would you have done different?
I think I would have just, I honestly think I would have just put more time and energy into it in terms of the stuff we didn't like to do. I think it was too easy for us to say, I don't like to do that part of it. We're just not going to do it.
What was the part you didn't like?
Just all of the stuff that didn't involve us playing, like having to call and pester people about getting shows, or, you know, do it like selling ourselves, or pushing merch, or, you know, working with people to get more merch made, or like arguing with the record label about the fact that we didn't have any fucking records left to sell, and we hadn't made any money. And just like, I think it was, to some degree, I feel like we got taken advantage of in those instances. And then to another degree, I think like, because we weren't as, hard about like what we should have been doing, we just never got anywhere. And like, I'd say that was the biggest fault of everybody in the band. Like I would blame all three of the other members of like, it was really easy to say it was the other guy's responsibility. So then none of us did it. And I don't think we were good at follow through either. Like, I think a lot of times we would go, hey, I started talking to this guy about a show. And then like 3 weeks later, it'd be like, whatever happened to that? And be like, I don't know. It's just like, the fuck, man? Why didn't we, like, did you email them back? No, I just kind of forgot. Or, you know, and back then there was a lot of letter writing too. Like we'd get these huge we'd have a mailing list at a show and people would sign up for it. And then we didn't do anything with it. I was like, there's the potential of another show somewhere out of state in that. And we just fucking ignored it.
Oh,
you know,
man.
Just sat there. collecting dust, that giant list of people's email addresses and shit like that. And it was just like, why aren't we doing anything with this? Because nobody wants to.
Dude, I know shit. So I am doing a talk down here. So I live in North Carolina in Raleigh, and there's a music center that just opened up, and it's a creative space for artists. And it was created by this guy who owns like 4 pharmaceutical companies, has like a shit ton of money, and literally wanted to give back. So he opens this space, and it's just, there's comedian workshops, there's art, an art space where you could show up and just do watercoloring, or bands could show up and play. And Hawthorne Heights just played there like last week. So
cool.
And I was like, and I ended up meeting them because I'm at this co-working space down here, and they were opening it up down the street, but all of the employees were here as they're opening it. And I was like, oh my God, I so fucking love being in music, and I feel like I can give back, and I would love to talk to these guys. And she's like, well, if you ever have a workshop and you want to do it, let me know. And I ended up reaching out to her, and I was like, hey, I want to do a talk for an hour about how bands can market themselves with their phone.
Yeah.
And I did it a couple months ago, and it was awesome. Like 5 people showed up. It brought me back to, okay, I'm on a stage right now. I'm just talking by myself, but I was so into it. And I'm just like geeking out on this because I was like, I love music, and I want to help these guys be like, you're in a band now. You have the mindset of what I had back when I was in my late teens, early 20s. Here's the things you might not be seeing. So again, like that goes back to the whole thing with email lists. It's okay, you have an email list. Well, what the fuck do you do with it? It's like, hey man, just email people and say, hey, here's a video of us writing a song together. Yeah. Or hey, on Instagram, I'm going to go live today and answer questions about the band. So show up and ask whatever you want. It's like they don't realize that people want all this stuff.
Yeah.
And back then, people don't give you your fucking email or your phone number unless they want to get something back with value, and none of us did anything with it.
Yeah.
It's like I remember we got these email lists. I'm like, why are we doing this? Like we don't fucking email anybody.
Yeah. It was so many missed opportunities when I go and think back on it now, like where we're just like, I don't know if we thought we weren't good enough, or we're too scared, or we're too lazy, but I think there was just a lot of like trepidation around us taking the initiative and pushing for. Like we played a show, one of my favorite shows ever. We played in this shitty little basement in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and we played with that band Appleseed Cast.
Oh yeah.
And those guys loved us, and they were like basically like, want to be friends, let's hang out, like let's go on tour together. And we're just like, nah.
Wow.
And not I don't think we all like sat around and agreed like no. I just don't think any of us really thought we could do it. I think we all sort of felt like, well, if we do that, then we're going to have to go on the tour with these guys. Like the fear of doing that, because in our eyes they were like, not that they were a huge band, but they were bigger than us, and that I think that scared us a little bit. Whereas like we all wanted it, and then at the same time we were a little scared. Like I remember one time Victory Records reached out, and they're like, hey, we've heard a lot of good things about you guys, we'd love to like have a conversation, and maybe can you send us a demo, and we'll set up a phone call. And we talked ourselves out of it. Like who knows? I mean, we were like, oh, I've heard rumors about that label. We talked ourselves out of even having a fucking conversation with them. And I'm like, why did we talk? Like, it was a conversation we could have had. Maybe it could have led to something else, maybe not. But like I felt like we were always sort of looking for a way to fail.
Here's a question, right? Now, okay, when you're a kid, all you want to do is play music, and you're like, I want to be in front of people, I want to play music, and you feel it, and all of a sudden you're playing music, and you guys got to where you are, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever find that maybe that next step didn't happen is because you stopped really thinking about that next step and like living it the same way as you did when you were a kid?
Yeah, I think so.
Because once you saw the reality of it and what was involved, it threw you off.
Yeah. I think we sort of relished in the stories of when our friends' bands started to get big, and then as a result, it started to get difficult. Like I almost liked hearing that, like, oh, those guys, now they're signed to this label and they have to tour all the time, and they're fighting all the time, and they don't like each other, and they're not getting along with their label. It's like it almost made me be like, see, that's why we don't want to get big. Like I used it as an excuse for us to not do it, and then at the same time, I think like as you start to get older, you also kind of make excuses for why it's not happening. Or I feel like there are a lot of reasons. Like I think we still wanted it, but at the same time, it started to become a little bit scarier, where it's easier to keep in the, well, why don't we just keep playing the basement shows and the little clubs and the colleges and all of that stuff, because we know, like, we're comfortable doing that.
But you also missed the fact of that was scary to you at one point as well,
right.
and you're doing it with ease.
Yeah. And now it's because, like, it got easy. We feel more comfortable in doing it, and we lost a little of that, like, what the next step. We got too comfortable in it and lose a little bit of that, like, what's the next step. I will say, like, one of the biggest, strangest things that happened to us was when we did that little reunion in 2012. We played at Maxwell's.
Yeah, I remember
that. And it was great. It sold out, and these guys came out from Japan to see us, and
didn't you play in Japan?
Yeah, they asked us to come play Japan. They were like, you guys have a following in Japan, and we went and we played 5 sold out shows in Japan, like, like between 300 and 500 kids a night, totally sold out venues. And it was like, and that was our taste of, like, we all came back on this high of, like, and also, like, I just think the Japanese culture around music is very different than it is here in general. I just, they appreciate it in a very different way. But the high we got from that was literally like that would have been the next level for the band if we had pushed hard enough, was that kind of setting, that kind of thing every night. And, at the end of that, we're all like, we are coming back here every fucking year and doing this. It didn't happen, but at the time we wanted to. But I mean, it's like we came home with money. Like, we came home with, we split money 4 ways, and we sold every piece of merch that we had when we were out there, and we signed autographs, and we went, they had our records at the record stores, and we did, like, an in-store acoustic thing. And it was the first time in a long time I felt like we were a real band. And that was a really cool feeling to go and experience that. But it also kind of made me sad to come back and think about, like, hey, we probably could have done that. Like, all it would have done was maybe, like, delayed our permanent jobs a couple of years, if anything. But we never really gave it the chance we should have.
I don't know why bands don't even do that. I talked to somebody about this, and I'm like, why didn't bands just take that opportunity to go overseas to these countries that you wouldn't have thought would have been so amazing, and just be like, we just fucking tour Japan all the time?
I've got a good friend. I started once I moved to Brooklyn, I started doing, like, some acoustic stuff by myself, and then I got I was playing some shows out here. It's funny, it became kind of not that difficult to book, like, a little solo show because I know so many people doing music out here. So I started playing, like, little clubs and stuff. And then a bunch of my buddies, I'm really good friends with PJ Bond, he was in that band Outsmarting Simon. And he was staying with me for a while. I was living in my place in Brooklyn, and he was working on, like, a solo record, and his brother and his brother's friends are, like, insanely good musicians. Like, they're the kind of musicians where you get in a room and you're like, hey guys, I have a song, I'm going to send it to you, I want you to play backup. And they hear it once, and then it's, like, fucking perfect. And you're like, wow, how do you do that? And the drummer that we play with is this guy Keith, and he actually plays drums in this pretty well-known band, We Are Scientists. And they play on, like, I think they played on, like, Jimmy Kimmel and stuff like that. But they really only play internationally. They're, like, huge everywhere outside of the U.S. They have a good following in the States, but outside of the States, they play, like, these massive shows.
It's amazing.
And I think it's just, like, different culture. Like, when we played Japan, somebody reached out from Germany, somebody reached out from Mexico. They're like, come play here. You guys will have a great time. There are a lot of people that would love to see you. And I said to the guys, I'm like, should we do this? And we wanted to. We never really got around to it. I think having kids really changes a lot, just because your responsibilities change. But I'm looking forward to the point when, like, my kids are going to school, because I feel like I could not that I'm gonna get back and, like, quit my job and start playing in a band again, but I feel like I could get back to it a little bit, enough where, like, maybe play a couple of shows, maybe write a new record. I'm excited about the opportunity or the possibility of that.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think it's stupid to think that just because we're at a certain age that, well, like, I'm almost 39, and it's dumb for me to think that age, or that word or those numbers define a point where you have to stop doing something. Like, Sometimes I just think like, man, what if I just fucking wanted to be like Frank Turner and just get an acoustic guitar and just start fucking touring again? But
Yeah,
then I think I'm like, man, I don't want to be playing shows at 10 o'clock at night and just like dicking
I know.
around all day and being bored. I literally start thinking like that. I'm like, oh my God, maybe there is a reason that I'm, 39 is a defining thing. But I think it's stupid that people will stop based on, certain things. It's like, yeah, you have kids now. It's like maybe one day that is a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows? I mean, it's so interesting. I hit 40. There's a dad at the school I take my son to, and he's like, he runs a startup, but his job is he's a proper musician. He plays shows, 3 times a week. He's fairly well known. He's got, not he's from Long Island, but he knows like a lot of the bands from the same. He's my age. He's friends with like the guys in all those bands from that scene. And so it's interesting like that he's doing it. He doesn't do it as often as he did. He plays like a little less regularly than he used to. He's got 2 kids now, but he still does it. And so I look at that and I'm like, if I really wanted to, if I really wanted to do it, I could do it again. And I got a lot of friends who are musicians and they're trying all the time. And I miss it. I definitely miss it, And I go see, like, some of my buddies will play, they're in new bands, and I'll go see their first show at some club deep in Brooklyn. And it's just such a great feeling to see those like friends up on stage having a good time. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Actually, I was going to ask you that. Do you still go to shows? I got a couple more questions then I want to.
Yeah,
probably
please,
but
please, yeah.
do you I loved where that went though.
Yeah.
So you do go to shows now? Like, are the shows that you go to mostly friends that you know, or do you actually? Okay, there's probably 3 parts to this. It's either do you go to shows that are friends, do you go to shows of the reunion bands that are playing, or do you have new bands that you actually geek out on and you'll go out of your way to go see them? Yeah,
it's a mix of all 3 of those. I think
Nice.
for the reunion ones, it has to be like. It's funny. I've fallen into this trap of buying tickets for shows and then not going a lot. And the worst is living next to the music hall, because there are literally nights where I'm walking home from work and I walk past the marquee and it's got like the name of the band that I have tickets for. And as I walk past, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going. I'm like, fuck that. I'm tired. I'm going to go home and put my kids to bed. And, I've done that some nights where like I come home and I go to my wife. I'm like, I have tickets for the show. She's like, you want to go? I'm like, kind of, but not really.
It's like the gym, dude. The worst part is showing up. After that, it's gravy.
Well, I think the other issue is that who I want to see is the last band, and they like don't go on until 11:30 or 12, and I'm just like, I can't do that anymore. It's good if there's a couple of close friends who like we all live in the same area, so if I can get a friend in on it, then there's a little more of that peer pressure to go. But I think a lot of it is like friends bands or like a much bigger band that I've wanted to see. Like if I'm a huge fan of that band, the Afghan Wigs. So when they did their reunion, I was like all over it. I brought my wife. She had never seen them. And she was like, holy shit, these guys are amazing. Like I'll go and see a band like that. Or, if it's like a slightly bigger band that's coming through that I really want to see. Or if it's like a reunion of a smaller band, then I'll potentially do that. Like, I'm semi-friendly with one of the guys who writes for, just via email, who writes for Noisy, which is part of Vice. And
nice.
when American football was doing like they're doing their reunion, that there's this club here where like all the late night like post secret shows happen, called St. Vitus. And so they were playing there, like they played at whatever it was, Bowery Ballroom, and they were going to play at midnight at St. Vitus. And he reached out to me. He's like, hey, would Penfold want to open for American football? And I'm like, yeah, we would, but I just know it's not going to happen. So
it's late, and that traffic getting here sucks.
Yeah. So I was just like, I'll just come to the show and hang out. So it's a little more like that kind of thing. But
do you go out of your way to find like newer bands?
What I think is amazing is Spotify's algorithm, like that. The weekly playlist that's how I find new music. I go into that. It's really usually pretty accurate, although sometimes there are some misses because we also listen to a lot of children's songs on my Spotify. So, But I found a lot of cool new bands. The thing that's weird about it is I really don't know the names of the bands, because the way you listen to music now is very different than when I listen to it on my phone on my way to work, and so I'm not really looking at like the album art or the name of the band. I almost know it more by when I listen to it and where it is in like my list of saved songs. So and also I don't know why, but I get confused when I look at Spotify over which is the band's name and which is the name of the song. So sometimes I'll like look at that and I'm like, oh, that's what that was talking. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, like I was wondering why their band name was like 10 words.
Yeah.
Wait,
yeah.
That one place you're talking about in Brooklyn, I saw the Refused get back together a couple of years ago, and they actually played at Terminal 5, and then I saw a video the next day that they went to this small place in Brooklyn.
I was at both of those shows.
Oh,
and
you.
one of my photos made it on that, like Rolling Stone the next day. But they played at that place closed. No, that place might still be open. But that place was called the Astronaut. It was tiny. I mean, we just like. There were so many people smashed into that club. That was very cool. That's the one thing I love about it doesn't happen as much for me. Like back when that happened, I wasn't married at the time and I didn't have kids, so it was easier for me to go to the Refused show and then go to the Secret show after. But but there's a lot of that. That's the cool thing that happens here in Brooklyn is like there's this little kind of like, oh, that band's playing this place tonight, and then at midnight they're gonna play X spot. Those are fun little pop-ups that happen sometimes.
Did you go to the Sunny Day show when they got back together at Terminal 5?
I did, and it was cathartic for me. Like
so amazing.
Especially because like I know a bunch of my friends went who weren't as into them as I was. Like they liked the later stuff, and really those guys got up and played like the first two albums, and that was it. And I was just in heaven because it was all the music I wanted to hear. So I thought they were fantastic. But yeah, that was a really good experience for me. I went to the Mineral reunion when they actually played out here, and that was cool. I don't know, I didn't like that as much as some of the other ones I did. I liked that more for all the people I got to see that I hadn't seen in a while.
That's another cool part. That's a nice benefit of going to the shows, because you'll bump into people and you're like, holy shit, I haven't seen you in fucking years, and you'll have like a conversation with them, and then next to them are like two people down as this other person that you haven't seen, and then you see like, wow, I'm surrounded by like 20-30 people that I knew back then, and I have to make my conversations very short because I really need to see this band right now.
Yeah, it is. It's a cool feeling though to see all those people from back in the day. It's great.
All right, so a couple more questions. Man, let's see. Do you hold on to any ethics that you had from back in the day that you kind of, plugged into yourself as like a teenager and said, I'm going to live like this the rest of my life? And did you hold on to that?
I don't know for sure, but I would like to think so. Like, I don't know that I've 100% identified those things. I think for me, there was this sense of, you know what? Yes, I had. And part of it was this idea of, I don't know if I want to call it the DIY ethic, but if I think about what I do for a living today, I work in advertising. I work with big brands to make like TV commercials and shit like that. It's some days suck really bad, and some days are a lot of fun, and there are good perks to the job. But I also manage a lot of people. And I've worked for a lot of folks. Like I've had a lot of bosses who they're managers. Like they can't actually do the thing themselves, and that always drove me crazy.
I hate that.
Like I had a boss who would ask me to do something, but they couldn't do that. Like if I needed more direction or I needed more information, they couldn't actually give me that because they weren't capable of doing it. So I've always held this thing in my head of like, and I think it comes down to that ethic of like just get it done. Like. Yeah. Making the album artwork, designing the T-shirts, making the fucking stickers, like figuring out how to get it done, even though I've never done it before. Like, I need to be able to do the work just as much as anyone else that works for me does. Otherwise, how are they ever going to respect me as a boss?
Yep. And
I think that's always been really important. And I also think just being respectful of everybody. Like, like I remember a very specific show from back in the day. It was the first time we played with that band, You and I. like I had seen them many times, and we had never played with them before. And I want to say it was somewhere outside of Pennsylvania, and there was like this huge snowstorm, and we had rented a van because our van had fallen apart. And we got to the show, and it turned out the VFW hall had like a fucking gas leak. So they moved the show to some girl's basement who was like a friend of the promoter. And we got to the show, and we were like, we didn't really know anybody there, so we were just hanging out in our van, and we're standing outside. And we're, like a little bit of the Penfold thing was like unless we knew you or you knew us and came over and talked to us, we kind of kept to ourselves. And Tom, who was the guitar player in UNI, who we all became like very close friends with after the fact, I think he thought we were being shitty about the fact that like the show wasn't up to our standards. And he like called us out when his band got up to play. Like he made a comment, not about, like he didn't directly say Penfold, but he made a general comment about people thinking they were better than like what was going on. And I didn't realize that until much later, because he basically came and told me after the show. But I think he thought like we were gonna either just like fucking phone it in or get up on stage and be like a bunch of assholes. And he just misread us completely. And so like we got down to this basement where it was literally the floor was made out of dirt, and there were poles in the way of us where like people couldn't even stand in a full circle because there were like poles blocking their view of us. And we just fucking like, it was one of the best shows we've ever played. Like we just fucking tore it up. And he came to us at the end, and he was like, I'm really sorry because I totally like misinterpreted you guys and your deal. He's like, you were amazing. He's like, I thought you were like completely something else. And I appreciated that, but two, I told him like we would never be disrespectful to anybody because we thought we were above them in any capacity. Like I am thankful that we're here and we have a show, and that anyone cares enough to even be here or like buy a CD afterwards or buy anything. And I think that general sense of like being respectful to everybody regardless of who they are has always been really important for me, and I think important for the band too. Like I don't know if that's just the way we were raised, but I think it's that kind of respect carries through to you for everything I've done. I think it's important. I think people appreciate it a lot more. Like I know a lot of people who come up and become who they are because they're hard or they're assholes about it or they're adamant about getting what they want, but they do it in a way where it hurts people along the way. And I think eventually that all comes back around to you. And you either find that you get to a point where you can't pull that shit anymore. And I also think the world's changed in a way where people are more empowered to kind of, get out there and call out people who are like that. So, I don't know. I think those are kind of the two things. I think respect and just that DIY ethic in everything you do.
I love it. I think it's a great answer.
Yeah, thanks.
You got my vote. Is there something you wanted to talk about that we didn't mention?
I feel like there is so much to talk about. The one thing I'd say we didn't talk about that much, which is fine, is just kind of like the I guess like Penfold's exposure in the scene a little bit was always like a little. I mean, we touched on it a little bit, but I think like we played such random shows, but I think we're one of those bands where like if you invited us to play and we could do it, we're like fuck yeah, and we didn't know. I always feel like one thing we were really bad at was timing showing up to the show on time. There was a flyer somebody posted on the Facebook page the other day, and I commented on it because I remember like we were one of those bands where like if we were the last band listed on the flyer, we assumed that it meant we were playing the last, and so we would like not take our time, but we were really fucking terrible about meeting on time. Like all our equipment was at my parents' house. We all had to drive to my parents' house, pick it up, load it in, get to the show. We never, that was back in the day. We didn't have fucking smartphones with maps on them. So like, we'd be like, did anybody print out the map? And we're like, oh shit. And like we'd run inside and I'd have to use my dad's computer and like hook the printer up because printers were temperamental back then. And like, print out the directions, make sure they were right, and then like print out 3 copies and make sure everybody knew where to go. We'd always show up late, and I felt like that was like this one thing we were so bad at was getting to shows on time. And I don't know if that hurt us or helped us. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was like we were early on, we were never a band that borrowed equipment. Like, we always brought our own equipment, which means we showed up in three cars, and it always pissed us off when people wanted to borrow our stuff. But we never said no. But we're always like, God damn it, why don't people? And then years later, we started showing up with less equipment, and it was one of the most freeing feelings I've ever felt as a band. We were like we would say it like, our bass player would be like, just don't fucking bring your cabinet, man. The thing's massive. We'll borrow somebody else's.
Yeah,
it felt, yeah.
No, I talked about that. I talked to the interview I had with Sean from Laymire. We were talked about it was fuck, I forget who it was, but we did that one time in the very beginning, and there was a band, Blue Channel. Blue Channel was the band that we played
Oh my
with.
God, I remember those guys. Like Brian.
They were brand new. I think they had just started playing in the scene, and they had all this nice new equipment, and we were playing at Skaters World in Wayne. And I remember I walked up to the bass player, and I'm like, hey, dude, do you mind if I borrow? Actually, it was a ballsy fucking question, too, looking back. I was like, can I borrow your bass? I think it was his fucking bass.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I kind of just got it. And I'm thinking, and I'm like, okay, yes or no, man. And I don't think I was that much of a dick, but sometimes in my head, I'm kind of like, well, but like looking back on it, I mean, asking someone to borrow their instrument, I think is way different than their cabinet. But at the same time, like, asking for like someone's cabinet and things like that, there is this there's a fine line, I think.
It's tough. Like, we never wanted to be the guys that asked, but we also never wanted to be the ones to say no when somebody else asked, because I felt like there was this sense of like, hey, we're all in this together, and bands are helping each other out, and I get it, but at the same time we're like, how dare you,
Yeah. Well, actually, it's really funny because we're playing. We didn't announce this yet. We're playing a reunion show with Humble in Teaneck.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it literally just kind of happened recently, and I'm like, my bass, I sold it to my buddy Sean, and I was like, hey, dude, I need to borrow that for the show. And he's like, absolutely. And then I'm talking to Jeremy from Humble. I go, dude, I don't even have a fucking cabinet. He's like, oh, I'll figure it out. I'm like, okay, great, because I don't even own anything anymore. So I'm hoping in that sense, I mean, sure, it'll be fine in that sense, but it's kind of funny to have this, and I'm like, I actually have this situation happening right now.
Yeah, that's so funny. Do you guys know where you're playing?
Yeah, we're playing at the Debonair Music Hall on July 21st.
Oh, that's so cool. So have you been practicing?
No, we're gonna basically practice the fucking day before the show. I'm not even.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah,
that's wild.
Like there's a whole bunch of stuff. And again, it's like, to go back to where we're talking about, oh, we do things differently. No shit, man. Once I was back in it, it was the same fucking thing. Everything's rushed. We're all stressed out.
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to get anyone on the phone. I was talking to the promoters. I'm like, look, just talk to me. I'm like, I'll handle it. Don't worry. And we're like getting the flyer done, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, I thought this shit was gonna be way easier, but it's actually still a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I mean, it's funny to think about. Like, the only benefit is like the ease of communication now, because of like texting and all of the other applications we have at our fingertips. I just think of like when we were doing the Japan thing, it was like, oh, this is awesome. Everything's sorted via email. I don't have to make 20 phone calls to find out if I remember being lost, trying to get to a show and being lost and having to find a fucking payphone.
Oh my God.
Call the number on the flyer and be like, where do you live exactly? It was such a different experience now than what bands are dealing with.
It is. But the funny thing is, when you actually are texting people, and they're not fucking replying, you're like, I know it's in your pocket. I know it's on you. I see you all the time answering text messages when we're conversing face to face. So don't tell me it's not fucking on. All right, man. Before we go, I mean, I'd say we pretty much fucking covered like a lot. I'm sure people probably have other questions and stuff, but I don't know, like any like final words or like final something that you want to end this with, where something that you want to say.
I think the thing I would say is that, and I'm sure that as you've talked to a lot of the guys who are no longer playing or are still playing, is like there's somebody driving by they're in a fucking smart car with their stereo so loud it's unbelievable.
I hate young people or old people.
Yeah, that's actually my final message. Is I hate young people. No, I feel like there's a and it's something we touched on at the beginning, which is there's a personality, I think, or a sense of what we did back then that just it's sort of like hardwired into our DNA in a way where it's like you never lose it. And it's really interesting to see, like, I'm sure, like, I think about you and you have your own business now. I think like a lot of that comes out of what we love doing, playing music and playing in bands. Like, you know, a big part of my job is getting up in front of large groups of people and having to sell them on an idea. And there's a similar feeling to like right before you get up on stage and play to an audience of people. And I think there's a bit of a high you get from that, or like the first time you write a song with your friends and you're like, holy shit, this is a good fucking song. 2 weeks later, you might decide it sucks. But in that moment, that feeling, that like it's hard to beat that. It's hard to beat that with anything else. And it's just really cool to know that it's not just a singular thing. There are so many other people out there. And I don't think it's something that goes away. I think for a lot of us who aren't playing anymore, we've just found other ways of like bringing that to life through the other things we do. And so I almost feel like if you're one of those guys who played in a band, you love that feeling, and but you're not feeling it anymore. It's like you got to find a way to feel that again. You know, it's such an awesome thing. That's finding little moments of that at work every day is such a great feeling. That it's hard to find anything better. And I'm nerding out now, but I really hope my kids play music. I think, it opened me up to all sorts of things I don't think I ever would have been a part of. Like even the fact that you and I are having this conversation today, the friends I've met, the people I've talked to. Like there's a coffee shop I go to every morning, and the other day I walked in and the music on the playing in the coffee shop was this band, Q and Not You from DC, that Penfold played with one time way back and up in like Westwood, New Jersey. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, how the fuck is this playing in here? Like, who even knows this album? And the barista turns around, he's got a fucking discount patch on the back of his jacket. I'm like, this is absolutely this guy's music. So then we just started talking, and he was like, from Long Island, and he's like, into the same kind of music. And there's this same fucking car is driving by again. He's just driving in circles. There's this, I don't know. There's like this, it feels like we were all part of this club that, and I'm sure it still exists today, but because I can only personify it in my own life and the things that happened to me, it's really cool to know that there's this group of people that kind of experience the same thing at the same time. And so basically what I want to say is kudos to you for doing this, because it's really cool to get to hear all these folks' stories and just like kind of rehash these memories that I hadn't thought about in a while. As part of this, I went onto the Internet Archive, and I found from an old Penfold website a list, like a past shows.html page of like all the shows we played from 98 to like 2000. Holy shit. And it's insane to look at some of these stuff and like look at some of the bands we played with back then, like, and think of the fact that, or even some of the shows we saw. Like, yeah, I remember going to see, like, I'm sure you were there, like when Jimmy Eat World played at Skaters World.
Yeah, we Ghetto Kids.
And and like they play, I have that on VHS, and like, and they played that show, and it was like there was fucking 40 people there. So nobody really gave a shit. Yep. Like half of the kids that went were roller skating during their set. It's just like, And
they're literally playing Clarity before it was released.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. With like, there's like, I literally have that video. Like their songs have different lyrics, but they're the same songs. And you're just like, oh my God, these are new songs for these guys, And I remember going to see Jimmy Eat World open for At the Drive-In at the Melody Bar. And one of the first shows Penfold played was with Caven and Piebald at the Melody Bar. Like, Jesus. We didn't even know who those fucking bands were. And it's just really cool to look back on that and go like, holy, we were into this thing before we even knew what the fuck it was. And before people were like, I don't even want to say famous, but before they were well known within that scene, and it's very cool to think that there are that many people out there that cared and gave a shit. So it's a rare, I think it's a rare thing, but it's a really awesome thing.